work as well. So I'm very much working at the moment with our ClickTech customers to help them improve their campaigns across Microsoft and Google. And it's the Performance Max kind of question is one that we get coming up a lot, and one that we offer a fair amount of guidance on. So yeah, it's a very current and very interesting topic for everyone, I think.
Amazing. I'm just going to admit to something that I just realized. And Jose, do you know what? Are you shaking, nodding your head? You know what I did? We only went live maybe 30, 40 seconds ago. So just as you were starting your introduction. So I'll do a little bit more about what I said at the beginning. And Jose, sorry, I'm going to ask you a question, but then you can start off with a little bit with what you said in terms of like your introduction. I'm so sorry, guys. It's our second ever webinar. So these kind of tech issues are expected, right? There's always something that goes wrong that you're like, I'm in StreamYard. I thought it would have just automatically gone on. It was giving me a countdown. So I thought when the countdown happened, it was like, okay, you're gone. Anyway, thank you to currently the 5 people who are live with us today. I will do another quick introduction of what I said at the beginning, but we've got lots to talk about, so it'll be a quick one. You know me, I'm Anu. I started PPC Live UK in about July 2022, and yeah, we've got our next event happening in October 26th, and yeah, we've got an amazing Jose as well, who's going to be one of our speakers next month. Nikki from ClickTech, who are been our partners in terms of sponsoring us and just ensuring that this event has kept on going. So really grateful for them joining me today. And this is like a little taster about what the event on October 26th is going to be about. And in fact, a little thing I'm going to add now that I didn't add before was the fact that their early bird tickets are still live, but they're going to end absolutely on Friday. So, you can get the tickets for the cheapest it will be. Join us. So I've got a more central location even that was confirmed today in Holborn, a really nice location. Holborn, there's lots to do afterwards. So there'll be great networking opportunities afterwards. I'll probably like hire out a bar nearby for us to continue chatting and drinking. PPC folks, we love a good drink. But yeah, I'm gonna go straight to you and to tell you for you to again, introduce yourself, but also let's get into the chat. Let us know a little bit about what you're going to be talking about on October the 26th.
So hi. So yeah, thank you. So I'm Jose. I head up the search department at Mortu and have been doing it for the last almost 4 years now. And no worries, we'll do the introductions. Yeah. So prior to that, I've been at Agency World. I've been doing it for just over 11 years now. And the last 4 or 5 years, I've dedicated myself a lot more to retail and e-commerce clients, especially fashion as well, and some travel. And hence the opportunity to have a conversation regarding Performance Max and what has worked for us. And also have the opportunity to talk about POAS, that buzzword that's currently going around, which is profit over ad spend. So my talk will be mainly focusing on, how can we utilize first-party data to really go after profitability with your Performance Max campaigns, and is it working well for us? And this topic that we're covering today is especially about that as well. It's almost like Anu mentioned, it's almost like a little deep small shallow dive into what we're going to talk about. Not a deep dive.
No, let's not do deep dive.
What we're going to cover.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so excited to talk and talk about it today as well.
Amazing. So one of my first questions to ask, because a lot of people, especially when PMax first got rolled out, there was concerns from people saying that it is cannibalizing their brand traffic, and it making this what they're spending on brand being a lot higher. Do you think that's the case? Do you think that's how PMax has been meant to be used? Is that what Google meant it to do? Or is it just people not putting the right things on, just not knowing how to structure the PMax campaign that led to that? What do you think?
That's a very good question. I think I think like every Google product that's launched, it doesn't end up doing what they want it to do, and it definitely clashes with what we want to do with our activity. I think when it was launched, we didn't have the opportunity to exclude brand activity.
No.
And then a few moments later, like we're talking about weeks, within weeks, I think, they gave us the opportunity to exclude brand. And the exclusion was a complex process where you needed to contact your Google manager at the time.
Yeah.
And then I think as months went on, you then contacted your CSS partner. And then now they've given us the opportunity to, I think a couple of months back, they gave us an opportunity with a form. And I think a few weeks back, we can do it with the brand listing of our keywords within our ads campaign. So I think they've listened to the people, if that makes sense, we've seen that brand is being consumed within this type of campaign. And we don't like it. We started to create reports because they didn't give us visibility on the brand traffic. And the brand traffic from Performance Max, not the brand traffic, but the search traffic. We looked at the display, the video, and the shopping, and we could start looking at that. And they didn't. We had to create scripts to have that visibility. So there was a lot of opportunity for us to see the data, but they weren't giving to us. But I think they're listening to us, and slowly they're feeding us a lot more data, especially with the brand keywords and the insights. I think to answer your first point on was it their objective? No, I think their objective was to have one campaign and to start off with like small, not small agencies, but maybe like brands that don't really necessarily have the capability to structure their activity in a granular manner to have Performance Max, which covers it all. What's happened is that they forced Smart Shopping to turn into Performance Max, and they forced everyone to learn PMax really quickly. And that's what we had to do, and learn it and adapt to it, and adapt to how it's functioning now.
Yeah. How about you, Nikki? What do you think? Was Google trying to pull the wool over our eyes, or did we just was there just a steep learning curve?
So I always tend to fall on the side of the fact that there's always this tension between an industry full of self-confessed control freaks and the need for automation. So when we look at something like brand within Performance Max, we want brand to be separate because we want to see how it performs. We know it's really efficient. We want to be able to go to our clients and say, look at this really low CPA that we've managed to get you. It's completely on us, not on the automation. Apart from the reporting that we want to do, and the human jelly brain knowledge that we want to have about it, I don't think there's really any detriment to that brand activity being included within Performance Max. It's just that we want to know, and we want to be able to see it. So the fact, we would get similar results, presumably, if it was included within Performance Max. We just wouldn't be able to attribute that success to brand in the same way. I don't think it was necessarily a malicious intent on the part of Google, but I think that the algorithm benefits greatly from the data that's fed through that Performance Max campaign if brand is included. And also, of course, when you've got a campaign type called Performance Max, it's going to go for the lower hanging fruit first. And it's, a bit like a truffle pig that it just sniffs out anything that it can. And brand is a really good opportunity for Performance Max to do that. So I don't think it's an intentional or a nasty thing that's been done, but I do think there's a want from the industry, rightly or wrongly, to be able to have those two things to be separate.
Okay, that's cool. And do you think it has improved over time since apart from we can now add negatives, just as a tool in terms of learning, the right assets to have, the automated assets, especially, is there still a lot more control that, that or an eye that we need to keep on it? Or is it actually, are you guys seeing improvement in how it's working for your clients?
I think the bulk of that answer I'm going to leave to Josie. The one thing that I, as someone that's more hands-on, because I tend to be more consultative, the one thing that I will say, which is slightly cynical, is that I think the pressure on Google to get YouTube revenues has only increased over the past few years. So where you can't see that split of traffic and you don't have control over that split of traffic, and we've obviously seen that article recently around CPCs being artificially inflated so they can meet revenue targets. I think for me, it's really difficult to answer that question when there's the machine learning element, the human input element, but also the slightly shysty behind the scenes Google element. It's difficult to extrapolate what's improved performance or not when you've got all of those three variables at play.
Okay.
Yeah, from my side, I certainly think that one of the objectives as well from the Performance Max, which goes back to the initial question, was to make our activity more creative. And one of the things that they pulled out from under our rugs was when your smart shopping campaigns automatically turned into Performance Max campaigns, it had display, a lot of them had display banners and text and a shopping feed attached to it. And suddenly you saw some horrific videos that were self-created by Google. And I work with a lot of brands, and we got some really upset clients. Not upset, but they were like, "Whoa, hold on." What then happened is forced our clients to start thinking a lot more creative, and we start utilizing the creative and working together with our social teams a lot more. So any creative that they start doing, which goes back to your point on YouTube, right? Forcing us to utilize YouTube as a stack is extremely key element for them. And that certainly forced us to start looking at that as well. Whether it's like 6-second videos or 20-second videos, it definitely picked up from our side. To answer the part of your efficiency, if we've seen efficient, so when we actually adopted Performance Max right at the beginning, I believe there was a adoption curve where we actually saw improvements in conversion rate, and that adoption curve was probably around January before it was forced upon us. When we're talking about 22, right? So when it was forced upon us around summertime, we didn't see the impact or the efficiency impact that we did see with the other clients. So it was almost like 8 out of 10 clients saw improvements, and it goes back to the point of how much of that was brand, and then suddenly from August onwards, where people actually had more control, we weren't seeing the significant improvements that they were claiming. Especially on some of our clients. I think now they've given us a lot more visibility on what we're doing, which is good. And I think we start looking at and controlling things a lot better, which essentially will make it more efficient.
Okay, that's cool. And Jose, earlier on you mentioned POAS, and unfortunately, our other speakers who are going to specifically be talking about ROAS and ROI and those kind of things, they couldn't join us today, but for anyone that doesn't know, what is POAS and why is, measuring at a profitability level a lot more important these days?
Yeah, certainly. And I think I've mentioned this before in one of my talks. So POAS is profit over ad spend. And is you start looking at profitability in a different way. And working in agency for so long, you work with your clients or your brands, and they give you a ROAS target. And in the back of their mind, they always have a POAS target already. They just don't know it yet. They know what they need to achieve from a business point of view and to make their finance team happy. But they give us a target, and we go in and we go to the system blindly, and we say, okay, fine, if we need to get a ROAS of 5, we import all of our activity, we make sure we split our campaigns and we make it work. And then 2 months down the line, they tell us, actually, hold on, this is not profitably from our side. We need to make it a ROAS of 6. And we're like, okay, fine, let's go in and, we restrict activity and we change our bidding strategies. And then 2 months down the line from then, they'll be like, oh, hold on, we've restricted our activity too much. Let's open it up again. And that conversation, that gap of understanding what is the profitability that they need to change has never been there. And I think that's going to be key is what we've been doing. And a lot of people have been doing this as well, is actually understanding how much are you willing to acquire a new customer, not acquiring a transaction. And acquiring the new customer will be key for your profitability. Because if you're willing to spend that to acquire a new customer, you don't necessarily need to turn the taps off because you're break even with that. So I think that'll be the element, and I'll be discussing that a little bit more as well in our talks. But that essentially that's it. Is making sure that when we're actively going or changing bidding strategies, we're doing it in a profitable way.
Amazing. One thing that came up in a weekly PPC chat that happens on Slack. So look for PPC chat. If you tweet, I know asking people to tweet right now might be a bit dangerous, but if you tweet a lady called Neptune Moon, she leads a PPC chat, and she'll give you a link to our Slack discussion that happens. And one thing that came up in a conversation that we had yesterday was the fact that some people actually don't know even like what their CPA target should be. It's like they do a bit of a, like, oh, this is the CPA target I want. I want to be as low as possible. And you're like, it's no, there's got to be a level where you are willing to increase it. Also that you get growth, in as well. Nikki, I'll pass it on to you. Do you find that issue a lot with clients who still don't know what their targets should be, or they're not measuring it properly?
Oh, all the time. And it seems to be like over the years, it's the common denominator of the drivers behind that seems to be that there's a stakeholder that wouldn't be happy if the number was 70 instead of 60. And there's not necessarily like a sentience there around the margin or additional overheads above and beyond the ad spend. So things like your in-house resource, any tech costs that are laid on top of that, ad serving, all of that kind of stuff. And quite often the answer is, well, it's always been 60. Our target's been 60. So we want it to be 60. And to Jose's point, you say, well, if you're going to bring in a brand new customer, so incremental revenue and incremental profit to the business, can it be 70? Then you get into that question of, well, our CRM doesn't account for tracking whether they're a new customer or not. Or so I think it's so finger in the air, and just depending on people's human comfort levels, as opposed to a lot of kind of finance data. And even with it's quite often more difficult with larger businesses, but with large established, even banks. So you would think that they were particularly financially savvy. And you say, do you know what this margin is? Do you know what these overheads are? Do you know what CPA is actually profitable as opposed to acceptable? Do you know what's profitable? And quite often the answer is it's a completely different team that has that information, and we can't find it, or we don't have access to it. Which, as the person that's labouring under those spurious targets, can be quite a frustrating answer.
So what is the biggest barrier, would you say? Is it that just silos of the departments not talking to each other that you would say is the biggest barrier, or just people just wanting to appease the CEO instead of actually doing the work properly?
The thing is, I don't think anyone sets out to like not do it properly, so it's always like something that's going on. But I think a lot of the time it's people having quite tunnel vision as to this is my CPA target, and not thinking beyond that, and thinking, well, that's not my job to think beyond that. It's above my pay grade. I don't know. But quite often I would say it's a kind of leadership management question over why is that not something that people are encouraged to look at. And when you pull that thread, it tends to be a data point of, we don't have the data in that clean way. We don't actually know how much a customer is worth to us, or it depends. So I think it depends on the business as to what the challenge is. But I think 80% of them are probably solvable with a bit of change of attitude and a change of focus. But again, the thing that I always try to come back to with these things when I tend to get frustrated with them is that we're talking here about CPAs, which is one metric, in paid search, which is one channel, in marketing, which is one department, in one business, in one region of the world. So when you zoom out and you go actually look at all of the things that this business has to pay attention to, for us, it's like everything. But for a lot of other teams in the business, it's just another thing that someone's asking them for, Yeah.
How about you, Jose? What have been your the challenges you've faced in terms of trying to get the ideal profitability targets for your clients?
Guilty enough. This works a lot better with clients that have an e-commerce mindset. So when we talk about B2B clients, it's a lot harder to quantify an average order value, although you can find an average order value. like from a finance point of view, it's not the same level as what we can do, right? So the challenge is having the conversation of when are you ready to break even. So if an account is set up in an immaculate way where we feel like, actually, you know what, this account is in a really good state, if we change anything, it will be incremental improvements. However, you're allowable to acquire a new customer is quite restrictive of what your activity can actually do. That's when you can have those conversations, or you should have those conversations on when are you willing to break even? Is it immediately? Is it in 3 months? Is it in 6 months' time? And that will allow you to break that glass ceiling that naturally happens in a mature account. So it's, I think my not my struggles, but by our challenges recently is we've got mature accounts, we've got clients that are mature enough, and how are we pushing them forward, knowing that this is their allowable? How can we push it forward to break even further? And utilizing tools that Google Ads actually allow us to do, which is bid higher for a new customer, whether or not the match rate is 80% or 60%, right? But we have those tools available for us to actually bid higher for those new customers, which is exactly what we're talking about. And just making sure that we understand, and the client understands that we want to work together. A lot of the times the marketing teams need to please the finance department.
Yeah.
So it's, as long as we can talk to the finance department through them, and we're a partner, not an agency. I know that everyone says this nowadays, right? So, but we're a partner, not an agency, and we're your friend. This is what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That makes sense. And I like the point that you made about how it takes a client getting to a mature level and you going on that journey of understanding their pain points, the different things that they need to look at. And it can be a long journey, because in different communities, shameless plug, the PPC Live UK has a WhatsApp community, and we'll give the link to it later, and where we just talk about our different issues. And some people are like, how can I accelerate to getting there? What can I do to do things quickly? And you're like, there's nothing quick about doing this PPC game. Nothing quick. You need to have the patience to stick it out, for months, for some years, and then and then you start really seeing the reward of your hard work after a while. It takes time to really get to that sweet point of like, yes, the client finally understands. So relationship building, building that trust at the beginning is very important, much more than even like the technical capabilities and the technical issues that they're going to have. Building that relationship and getting them to be listening to you and not just whatever Google says that, advises you to do is important. So, and it's not about, trust us so that we tell you not to listen to anything Google is saying, but when Google tells you something, let us discuss it so that we discuss what makes sense for you, what doesn't make sense for you. I think that's a big deal. Another very cool, important point I feel that we had, in fact, the main, title of our PPC chat yesterday was the difference between, the platform automation and human automation. And I think, as Nikki, you mentioned earlier on, we are self-confessed control freaks. We just want have all control. And there's some people are going into the whole, I feel, frenzy of like, oh, we're going to lose all our control. Oh my God, my job is going to disappear. And I'm like, that's not the case. There's actually a long way, as we said, a long way to go for the machines to really actually understand what a customer exactly wants when they're searching for stuff. So what would you say is, and I'll come to you, Nikki, as well, what would you say is the right balance of having hands-on, making sure you're keeping hands-on control and putting in the different levers in place, like if this happens, then this should happen, and then just leaving the automation, the platform to do the automation? What do you say the right balance is?
Oh, this is such a search response, but it depends.
Yeah, no, it's a marketing response. SEO will claim that as well.
So I don't know if you've seen this. They use this kind of levels of autonomy when they're talking about self-driving cars, right? And at one end, there's no automation whatsoever. Then you've got like driver assistance, like things like cruise control. Then you've got a level that's like, oh, it knows when you're crossing over a lane and it can correct that. And that goes all the way through to like self-driving cars, right? No one is going to suggest that, you know, a 62 plate car with cruise control is a self-driving car, because it's not. It's something that assists the human in doing that. So I would say the difference is, if let's say you've got a standard search campaign and you've got some automated rules and now we're using a bid strategy, that strategy is led by a human and then with a little bit of intervention, a little bit of support. Whereas when we look at something like Performance Max, it's obviously machine led with a little bit of human limitation when we're talking about brand exclusions and that kind of thing. I think there are brands that are particularly financially sensitive. There are brands that are particularly sensitive when it comes to their branding. Josie, I know you mentioned the auto-created YouTube videos, which look kind of similar to a GCSE business studies project sometimes. So I think it really depends what your sensitivity is to those things. But I would say if you are a developed enough business that you have your own video assets, for example, then something like Performance Max is well worth a try if you are equipped to input manually all of those as the human element of that intervention, to provide your own assets that are to the standard that you need them, which is a little bit backwards, I know, because Performance Max is quite often touted as, you know, a great solution for businesses that are less developed, to help them cover all these different surfaces without needing to create all those assets. So there's a difference between doing it properly and doing it well. And I think it depends what position your business is in and whether you are equipped to do it properly yourself, or whether the kind of properly degree that something like PMax can do it at is enough. So it's going to be different, but I think there is the thing that everyone will have in common is that your comfort zone is not necessarily constructive. It's not necessarily helpful, because we have lots of preconceived ideas about brand versus generic, or search versus social versus video versus display kind of stuff, that I think if we can put those to one side and just test a few things with an open mind, then it can help figure out where that sweet spot is for individual businesses.
How about you, Josie?
I certainly agree, and Nikki actually fails to mention something that she mentioned a few months back, which is if you restrict an artist with so many things, then you know that Mona Lisa is not going to come out smiling.
I remember that.
Those were not her words,
to be fair.
But yeah, I think we definitely don't want to restrict it, but there are certain things. I work with a lot of brands, and their tone of voice is extremely important. So we wouldn't give power to Google to create ads, for instance, or change headlines. I think in terms of bidding strategies, they do have some recommendations that you can choose to, and I can be corrected, and please do correct me. I want to be corrected on this, but if you set your bidding automations or AARs, which what they call it, to bid to maximize conversions, and then there's the next level, which is maximize CPA, and then it's maximize conversion value, and conversion value with a ROAS target. Technically speaking, it'll never go back to a previous developed algorithm. So it'll only improve your algorithm further, and you can choose to do that or not. I think adding keywords are a strong one. Depends how you feel about it. Setting them to broad, it's a mixed feeling. I feel like if we're going to restrict ourselves to what we were doing 5-6 years ago, then we're going to be losing the game. I think it's all about what Nikki mentioned something which is really important. It's about testing as much as possible, and you'll certainly have some wins and you'll have some losses. And then you'll run those tests again 6 months down the line, and it'll be vice versa. What won, for different accounts. You'll never have one solution from the same account. It's just trying to test as much as possible, trying to stick to a specific line, but almost play the game. We can't go against them, because now you either do standard shopping or you do Performance Max, right? You can't play against them. So it's how can we learn the game as much as possible and utilize it to our advantage? And I feel like that is almost a bridge between allowing the system to automate ourselves or us, or having automations in place where we say, if the budget goes X amount, what can we do? Those are restrictions that we need to put checks for ourselves. But in terms of automating the account, it's all about how comfortable you are with what Google's capabilities are, because at the end of the day, they're still a computer.
Yeah. So one phrase I like using, especially in this world of automation, is garbage in, garbage out. If you give it good data, you get good data. If you give it bad data, you get bad data out. And I think what has also become a lot more important, and I don't feel like we were talking about it, but then automation came and Chat GPT came out, and then it kind of got quietened out in terms of just using first party data, being able to pull in your first party data. And I think that is important, but also I feel clients also have some challenges, especially I feel for maybe B2B clients, they don't necessarily have a good CRM set up. Or is it the other way around? I think it would be probably the B2B. Like, yeah, how important is it to be pulling in your first party data in? And are there roundabout ways of doing it for people who go, oh, I don't have a structured CRM? Is it just a matter of get started and creating one, or is there another way of doing it? Josie, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, of course, surely. It's essential to what I do. It's essential to what we should be doing, really. If you don't have first-party data, and it's going to be extremely challenging in the market today, especially when you're with Google, inflating CPCs for one reason or another. And there's so many. The markets are saturated, and I speak from a retail point of view, but even from a B2B point of view, you're going to be competing against someone. And if you don't have first-party data to allow you to make decisions, or for Google. So what I see is exactly what your point you said, right? Garbage in, garbage out. The more information that you give to Google, you're hoping that the better it has in data to make better decisions for you. There are tools out there. I would suggest looking at tools. There are tools that have APIs directly with Google that will connect your data, and it'll support you curating the data. I'm not sure about whether I'm not sure whether B2B is suffering more in having a CRM system, because I would assume they would need a better one, going from an MQL to an SQL to a sales.
Right?
But
Exactly.
hey, assuming, right? But I have seen a lot of retail brands as well struggling with like CRM data. But so I think there's a mixed bag around it, and it's important, especially around 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, Google took away and I know this is definitely another topic, for cookie policies, the fact that they can create similar audiences to our existing customers.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they tell us for Performance Max was that Performance Max, with the data that you have, it will look for customers as the same as the ones that you've inputted when you put your audience in. So that's a really key one. It's almost like they're doing similar audiences, but they're not calling that because of cookie policies. And it's one of the only campaigns that's currently doing that. And I think lead gen will, or demand gen will definitely be one to cover that as well. So first party data is key, because it goes back to the point of us understanding as well who's a new customer and who's not a new customer, and are we doing it profitable. So one of your points as well at the beginning is you need to spend money to make money, but you want to spend money on the right customers. Who are your right customers? Are you going after existing customers? Are you going after new customers? So it's all of them.
Absolutely. And you, Nikki, what do you think?
I mean, the first kind of 6 years of my career, I was working with small agencies and small businesses that didn't know what CRM stood for, let alone have one that's, set up well. So I think one of these things, when we're looking, that it is possible to contrive a marketing strategy or an approach that provides that information. So let's say you ran a lead form campaign on LinkedIn or whatever else it might be. It's possible to do like an isolated activity that will get you email addresses or phone numbers that you can then use something like customer match. So then you've got that first party data technically that you can build in. So firstly, I wouldn't want businesses to feel kind of disheartened that because they don't have an all singing, all dancing CRM, like that's just not something that's open to them, because it can be, but sometimes it's just a case of structuring some other activities with that as a bit of an ulterior motive to get that data and to get that information. But also I think there is this, again, when man and machine clash together, that the algorithm's going to take into account lots of different signals. And again, with the similar audiences element, can consider that kind of stuff. But when we say about garbage in, garbage out, and we say, oh, it's not garbage, we've got this first party data that we're feeding into the system. It's kind of like when you're programming an AI, the bias that you have can be inbuilt into that. The bias that we have can be inbuilt into the segmentation of that data in the first place. So we could say something like, here's a list of our most valuable prospects, or feeding in what we deem to be our most valuable customers. The AI might not actually agree that they're our most valuable, depending on how we're defining that. So I think it's great to use when there's a purpose, when you are building off of that existing customer base, or when you're upselling or cross-selling or trying to reach your existing customers. But I don't think it's necessarily the be all and end all if you're looking at a prospecting campaign, or if you're building, more, not necessarily awareness when we're talking about Performance Max, but when you're doing a bit more of a suck it and see strategy rather than the exact people we want to reach. But I think there's definitely information that we can pull in, like setting up additional conversion points, adding conversion values and those kinds of things, that isn't necessarily first party data, but is information that can prop up what the algorithm might assume about what it's doing.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And I'm going to ask one last question, because yes, this is not supposed to be like an in-depth, kind of thing. We want you to come to the event on October the 26th. For that, where you'll find us there. Nikki, are you going to be there?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I hadn't asked her yet. I wasn't trying to put her on the spot, but I just did. I just came to my mind to ask. I'm sorry.
I will now.
I know. I am gonna put you a little bit on the spot, but since you've been here, because I remember, I don't remember the exact quote, but I remember like a couple of events ago, the first time you came or the second time you came, it was like you enjoyed it so much and you're like, this is a good reason for me to come out. What is your honest opinions about the event as someone who's been to a past PPC Live UK event?
It's the most kind of friendly, sociable version of a networking work kind of event. I'm usually, and I remember saying this to you actually with the first one that I joined, usually I'm sat at events thinking, oh, is this the last talk? How long does this one go on for? Have we got a break soon? Am I going to be able to like sneak out to get the next train without anyone noticing? Which often isn't likely. But I think it's the first one that I've sat there and looked at my watch and been like, oh my God, it's already, like, it's almost finished. And it's because it's super laid back. It's all sofas and pizza and drinks. It's not, oh, hello, I think we met before kind of thing. So if there was literally any search event you were going to attend, this is the best one to do so, that doesn't include, buying hundreds of pounds worth of tickets and booking travel 3 weeks in advance. So yes, I hope to see many people there, because it's just a geek out. It's a really fun geek out rather than being like an uptight industry event.
Amazing. Thank you, Nikki. I promise I didn't give her a script to say that. I didn't even let her know I was going to ask her that question. I'm very an impromptu person when it comes to this webinar. So thank you, Nikki, for that, from the gut kind of your review of the events. And yeah, I hope that gives as many people who will watch this live post, an incentive to come and join the community. We're growing, we're booming, we're back to doing in-person events. There's so much that's changing on a week. This webinar could last like a couple of hours, and we'll be talking about all the different ways of automation. But one last question I want to ask is, especially like one area, there are always some like subsects, different industries who go, oh, Google is not creating all this automation stuff does not work for us. They're not looking at us. They're not even caring about us. And I think that's especially from like either like the SMBs who just don't necessarily seem to have enough data to use automation well. What would be your advice to those kind of brands? And especially when, the PPC advertisers who have those kind of small, clients where the client is trying to get as much possible from every tiny little pound that they're spending. Do they try automation, or do they try to put their, foot down a lot harder in branding so that they can build that volume later? What will be your biggest advice? Josie, I'll come to you first.
Those were several questions.
Sorry. What's your advice for small businesses trying to use automation?
I think in order to use automation, you need to have the right data, right? So track your activity. I'm from an old school chain of thought, which if you can't track it, don't do it. And which is extremely important. If you can track anything, then you can input into the system to automate it. But it's a tricky one because, like you mentioned, a small to medium team or brand, they 10 grand is worth a lot more to them than to another brand. And how we utilize it to our advantage is key. And to one of your points, which was focus on branding. If I've had N number of brands and SMBs come and say, let's switch paid search on, and that's going to revolutionize our activity and our marketing strategy. That's a quick turn on. And if it doesn't work, we switch it off. And they have no branding strategy behind it, and that kills me. And you can't expect someone, you can't bid. You don't have no data. You're new to the market, and you're bidding on generic. And if you're going to bid on brand, it's 80% people that already know you already bought from you. It's like it's easy data, and I suggest having that data because it's easy data. You can identify who your customers are and whatnot. But you're not going to grow by bidding on brand. You're going to grow by bidding on generic. And the algorithm utilizes, every time someone searches, has over 40,000 different points and audience signals that it utilizes to change your bid. You're not going to do that. It's going to take you months to do something that the algorithm does in seconds. Yeah. So not automating it is I'd rather restrict activity to a small group of campaign and automating it than have several campaigns and managing it and almost saying, no, I need to do it manually. But it doesn't work for everyone. There's always an element. I think my team is probably, I'm sure I have someone in my team doing manual CPC somewhere because they want to test it. It's like, and they'll come up like in 2 months' time, they'll be like, oh yeah, we've done this and it worked or it didn't work. So we're always testing. But I think data is important. And if you have the data, as much data as possible, you should automate. Automating is faster than what we can do. Yeah.
Similar answer, Nikki, or do you have anything else to add?
I mean, completely agree. The thing that I would add, again, kind of by way of reassurance, I suppose, is just any progress is better than no progress. So to use the car analogy again, we went from manual cars to automatic cars, and then you had cruise control, and then you had lane awareness. And we didn't go from like a Model T Ford to a Tesla self-driving car like in one. So whether it's using rules, even if it's just alerts to tell you when something's going wrong, that's an automation. It's not changing anything itself, but it's still giving you a heads up that you didn't have otherwise. So use things like alert rules, then maybe change them to rules that implement change. Something like a max clicks bid strategy is still an automation. It's still taking those signals into account. And then 100% on the brand activity or the upper funnel activity driving that volume, because you're not, by whatever you're trying to do, if you've got a certain amount of budget and you're focused on brand search, that's just not going to scale itself. There's got to be more awareness to drive that volume. So whether you free up a bit of budget somewhere for a generic campaign, whether you work on your organic search, do a social campaign, discovery ads, whatever it might be, doing something to drive more of that search volume. So then you've got the data volume to automate. I think on a conversion side, if you're specifically looking at conversion data and the volume that you've got of that, you don't only need to track your final conversion point. So track people going on your contact us form as a conversion, track people like clicking on the chat, literally any signal on your website that makes that user seem slightly more valuable than anyone else include those conversions if you need to within bid strategies to get it moving. And again, it's bodging it, right? It's not a completely clean maximize conversion strategy, but what it is doing is maximizing the valuable actions that are taken on the website, which is still a step further than doing it all manually and not benefiting from all of those signals being referenced. So yeah, if you can't win the race, at least, you know, get halfway. Just
beating it,
marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually reminds me of our talk on micro conversions in the, you know, July event. We're going to have another one, micro conversions kind of talk in the new year, and just talking about those like little, you know, steps that, as you said, Nikki, indicate that this is a valuable customer, this person is closer to convert, and then just get all your data together and make sure they're converting. Okay, so before we end off, I will just remind everyone that, yes, please, again, come to our event on October the 26th. Jose is going to start off, actually, the session with his talk about maximizing PMAX to acquire new customers without cannibalizing brand. We're then going to go on to Nadia Mursal, who's going to talk about thinking beyond ROAS. We're going to have Ashley Royalty talking about from chaos to clarity, modern marketing's path to higher ROI. And then we're going to have a networking break, food break, and then going back into talking about looking through the black box of Google Ads and finding growth. That's going to be done by Ashley Fletcher from Athena. So yes, I hope you join us for that. But for now, I'll say a big thank you to my two co-speakers on this webinar today. And yeah, please go buy your tickets. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's